What'd you miss? Over 50 Palestinians killed in confrontations with Israeli troops today after tens of thousands converged on the Gaza Strip border in a violent protest, casting a shadow over President Trump's contentious inauguration of a U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. I want to bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Edward Djerejian, director at Rice University's Baker Institute. Mr. Ambassador, I know that you were opposed to the president's moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, but now that it has happened, how can the U.S. make the best of this? How should the U.S. harness the goodwill that's been created in Israel as part of a broader strategy to perhaps offer something to the Palestinians? What's the path forward?
Well, I think the main priority for the administration should be to reestablish itself as an honest broker or a valid interlocutor between the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Arab states to really find a way forward to negotiate a peace settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think the unilateral move on the part of President Trump to declare Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the embassy to Jerusalem has obviously caused a very bitter reaction on the Palestinian side, and therefore the goodwill has to be reestablished by the United States. I feel it's very important for our country to play that key role between the Israelis and the Arabs, and in this case specifically the Palestinians, to move the peace process forward. So that should be the main priority. You're seeing on the television screens and all the reports the contrast between the celebration in Jerusalem of the establishment of the embassy in Jerusalem, and the other hand, the demonstrations, the violence, the death, the injuries in Gaza, and demonstrations in Jerusalem by Palestinians and in other Arab countries. So it's really a picture of sharp contrast.
Yeah.
And combine this, Ambassador, with, of course, the administration's announcement that it is withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal. Is there the perception in the Mideast at this point that the U.S. is doing Israel's bidding, and will that then also further damage the U.S.'s ability to broker not just peace between Israel and the Palestinians, but also amidst other parties in the region?
Well, you're right. There is this perception, especially in the Arab world and in Muslim countries, whether right or wrong. The fact is that, of course, we have been and will continue to be a strong supporter of the state of Israel. It's one of the tenets of our foreign policy in the Middle East. But in this case, certainly the whole history of U.S. involvement on the Arab-Israeli conflict has been to play this role of a instrument to bring the two sides together to produce peace agreements. We succeeded in doing that under Jimmy Carter's administration between Israel and Egypt. Under Bush 41 and Secretary Baker, we created the Madrid Peace Conference. We got the Arabs and the Israelis in direct face-to-face discussions that led to not only the Oslo Accords, which went unfortunately nowhere, but certainly was the framework for Israel and Jordan to get together and create the second peace treaty between Israel and an Arab neighbor. So what I'm saying is that the United States should really do everything possible to maintain its very important position as the honest interlocutor between the two sides, and everything possible should be done to that end, I think.
So is there anything that the administration could do now to reestablish its position as that honest broker, especially given the perception that the moving of the embassy set that back?
Well, one thing it could do is, it was very interesting. If you remember when President Trump made the announcement a few months ago of moving the embassy to Jerusalem and declaring that, in America's view, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, senior administration officials concomitantly were backgrounding all of you in the press, basically saying nothing has changed. The future status of Jerusalem has to be the subject of final status negotiations. Also indicating that that would involve, in Jerusalem's case, Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian independent state living in peace and security next to Israel. So there are confusing signals up front and on backgrounders. Where is the administration's peace plan for the Israeli-Palestinian settlement, which, look, I applaud the administration taking the initiative to put this as a priority. But we have seen nothing of what that plan is and whether or not it's going to be tabled.
And sir, just quickly here, is this further complicated by the perception perhaps that neither side is necessarily open to talks at this point in time? I mean, it would take some significant massaging from here, would it not?
You're absolutely right. Since 2014, the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations have been frozen. This issue has become one of these dangerous frozen conflicts that is not going anywhere in terms of peaceful resolution. And what you're seeing is increasing violence on the ground. And this is a bad omen. Right now, Israel and the region is in a very fragile situation. From Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas in Gaza, the situation is quite, I would say, dangerous. If you listen to Israeli military intelligence and security officials, they are certainly focusing on the dangers on Israel's northern border with Lebanon and Syria, and Hezbollah and Iranian moves into Syria in a military sense. And they are predicting that there may be a conflict on Israel's northern border. You couple that with the demonstrations we're seeing on Gaza, even in Jerusalem by Palestinians on the embassy move, and elsewhere in the Arab and the Muslim world, the situation is fragile. So I think in my long experience in Middle East affairs and in negotiations, when there is a loss of hope on the ground, dangerous things happen in that part of the world. And I think the administration has to at least try to restore the hope that there will be a peaceful settlement.
Thank you so much.
And let me say that settlement, this is very important. That settlement has to be based on the principle of land for peace under UN resolutions 242, 338 and 1967. No peace for peace formula will work. And by that I mean economic solutions, security arrangements. It has to be based on land for peace.
Well, sadly, at the moment, it looks like we are a ways from that kind of settlement. Thank you so much for your perspective, sir.
You're
we appreciate
very welcome.
it. Edward Djerejian, Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy Director and a former U.S. ambassador to Israel.